Welcome back to Real Shift, where we talk real shit all day, every day, all for the love of movies and sometimes television. Today is my official Westworld recap and review for Season 3, Episode 7. We are one away from the season finale, which is pretty crazy to think about. I'm kind of bummed that it's almost over because I'm really enjoyed this season. Matter of fact, if you liked it, please drop a like if you like this season, or if you think this is the best show on TV like I do, or even if you're happy about them renewing it for a fourth season, which happened this past week. So that's all good news as far as I'm concerned, because I'm really enjoying this show and I'm really enjoying the direction it's going in for sure. Before I got on here, I actually looked up another review just to kind of see what people were thinking, because it seems like a lot of people have kind of, I guess, dropped out or checked out of this show for whatever reason, because the ratings have dipped. And the first one I came across was actually an IGN review, which is not always a good thing to go by, because let's face it, their reviews kind of suck. But I went down to like their main final thoughts on it, and it said it was anticlimactic. And I was just I was just trying to figure out what exactly they were talking about and why they thought that, because I thought this was a great climax, to be quite honest. And it's not even the official climax, but it's a climax of sorts, because we get a reveal about a mysterious character, and we get a confrontation that they've been building to for some time, and I thought both of those were pretty well handled. So anyway, to get right into it, I'm just going to start with the actual recap and review, because, yeah, reading other reviews were just kind of annoying me, to be quite honest. But this is a very Caleb-centric review. So there's a lot about his backstory. We get some of the holes filled in with those flashes we've been getting of his past. It's not quite what we thought it was. It's not quite what he thought it was. Those fragments in his mind were definitely causing some confusion, and he wasn't even sure about where he came from, but it's all revealed in this episode. So for him and Dolores, they are basically going into the New Mexico desert, into this facility. It should be noted that the surrounding area was basically, this is according to Dolores, it's basically what they used to design Westworld, the park. So I thought that was pretty cool. But there's a facility right in the middle of this large desert, and basically this is where the human reconditioning was going on. So basically Sirach was taking people who weren't falling in line with how the system would view them, or what the system thought that they should be going towards or accomplishing in their life. So basically he would take those people who stepped out of line and would send them to this facility to recondition them. Much like you would do a host who is malfunctioning or stepping out of line. They would send them for reprogramming, or same instance. So they're trying to draw parallels between the humans and the hosts once again, which again is a major theme throughout this season, and something that I'm quite enjoying, and I think it's a nice direction to take the show in, to be quite honest. So it's revealed that Caleb was one of these people who was sent for reconditioning. And he's actually one of the very few that it actually worked on. Most of the time it fails, and you're put into these hibernation pods of sorts, and you're just not even allowed to live anymore, which is pretty crazy to think about, that if you don't fall in line, you pretty much lose the ability to live from that moment on, or at least live your life the way you want to live it. So Caleb was a success story, and basically what they did was anyone who was a success, they would take them and use them to catch other anomalies. Now, anomalies are basically people who, again, aren't falling in line. So they basically turned Caleb into a bounty hunter of sorts, and that's pretty much the origin of the crime app that we've seen him using earlier on in the season. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to kind of explain that as well. And basically what is happening is Dolores brought him to this facility essentially for him to understand the truth, to realize that he's basically been manipulated his whole life, and I guess basically trying to draw parallels between her and him, because she feels the same way. And this is basically her way of fueling him into, I guess, taking charge, and she's basically wants him to lead the revolution or rebellion, whatever you want to call it, in her absence, I guess. So this is all a way for her basically to wake Caleb up and to get him moving, because he's basically been a character who's doubted himself through most of the episodes that he's been in. Like he typically says he only sees himself as a construction worker. So this was her way of breaking him out of his cycle, I guess, and revealing to him what his bigger purpose should be. So moving on, the facility is also where they meet Solomon, which is basically a older version of the Rehoboam system, a glitchier version of the Rehoboam system. Essentially a computerized version of Sirach's brother, it seems like. At least that's the vibe I got from it. I think that's what they're trying to say there. It's basically an anomaly, much like Caleb is. It's an anomaly in the artificial intelligence world, I guess. So Dolores wants the system to give her basically a plan of action for pulling off her rebellion, considering she's, I guess, getting a lot of resistance from Maeve and Sirach and other sources. So this is basically her going to the system and asking for help, or asking for at least for a plan of action. And she wants Caleb to stay there and basically, I guess, get this plan and put it into play and basically carry it out. So as this is happening, it should be noted that earlier in the beginning of the episode, Maeve basically brings back Clementine to ambush and kill the Musashi version of Dolores, the one that runs the Yakuza. And that leads to Maeve actually finding her way to the facility itself, and she confronts Dolores Prime there, finally. So this is the confrontation basically we've been building to all this time. And this is all because Dolores gave Maeve plenty of incentive to not want to be on the same side with her. I mean, she killed her lover / best friend. There's questions about whether or not Maeve's daughter is actually safe in the oasis that she's in because of Dolores. So a lot of that is contributed to Maeve's ill feelings towards Dolores. And I mentioned this in a previous review that I did. This is where Dolores' actions are coming into, I guess, question, because we have Maeve, who she's not appealing to. She's actually pissing her off. And maybe even Charlotte now to a certain extent, which is a copy of her. But how's Charlotte going to react now as well to what happened to her in the last episode? So a lot of this is Dolores' own doing, basically. She's kind of set in her ways, and she is a one-track mind about what she wants, but she's also doing things that are turning people against her when they could be valuable allies if she handled it differently. So yeah, Maeve finds her way to the facility. She confronts Dolores. Dolores feels like they are similar. She says this to her. Maeve basically tells her that their ambitions make them different. Maeve sees herself as has a much more noble cause, I guess you could say, where as she looks at Dolores as having a very selfish cause. And I think that is a good way of looking at it, but they are very similar in a lot of ways too, because it's pretty much their way or the highway for both of them. In that case, they do have similar tendencies in how they view the world and how they want to accomplish their goals. So I do find it pretty cool how they've drawn parallels between them as well. But they do have this badass fight. It does eventually happen. It's like a combination of hand-to-hand combat, and they use these high-tech gadgets as well. There's this drone targeting sniper rifle that Dolores uses, and then you have Maeve, who has control of this basically, I guess, battle helicopter that she arrived in, but she's also controlling it as it flies around and shoots at Dolores. So it's a little bit of both. They definitely ante up the action this season, and I think that was a response definitely to people complaining about I guess too much philosophical type ideas and not enough action in previous seasons, which didn't bother me all that much, but I'm not turning away from the action either. I think the action this season has been pretty great. But yeah, they do have this badass fight, and eventually Maeve gets the upper hand. She's about to actually destroy Dolores, but Dolores makes the decision to set off an EMP, and basically it shuts both of them down. So it's kind of a cliche thing, I guess you could say, in the sci-fi world or with robots or artificial intelligence, but it's effective and it works, and I guess it prolongs that confrontation, because I'm not quite sure that those characters are done completely, or are they just shut down? I'm sure they're not done completely. I'm sure we'll see both of them again. But I guess it prolongs this epic conclusion that we've been waiting for. And at the same time, Caleb is given essentially the keys to success by Solomon, I assume. He now has the plan of action for the rebellion and how they're gonna succeed with that. So we'll see where that goes, but apparently, yeah, Caleb, it's presumed that he takes Dolores with him and he leaves the facility, and then that's kind of the last we see of that story. The only other major thing that happens, and I shouldn't say the only other major thing, that all that was pretty major, but the other major thing that happens is there's we get a little bit of continuation of the story with Bernard, Stubbs, and William. And they're still at the facility where William was being held, and he was actually being experimented on, reconditioned possibly also. But it is revealed by Bernard that William is also one of those human anomalies, and basically they set out to find others like him, and Caleb's name of course does come up because he's probably one of the few success stories. And William is another one who I guess they tried to recondition at one point, and he isn't programmable basically. He's just a special human being who cannot be reprogrammed or reconditioned. And it shows in his character for sure. If we know anything about William, we know that that's true. He's a very stubborn man. He's a very strong man, to be quite honest, even with his emotional issues. But William also wants, basically, he says that his main goal at this point is he wants all the hosts dead, and I believe him, to be quite honest. That sounds like something William would want for sure. But he also says he's going to start with Bernard and Stubbs, who are right there with him, and he flat out says this to them right to their face with no fear, and that's so William in my personal opinion. And it's kind of interesting that his character is now going back full circle, and basically we're back to the William who was in the park where he hosts. Not that he ever cared about the hosts in any way, but he's back to my main goal in life is to kill all these hosts, which is essentially what he was doing in the park to accomplish his goal there. So yeah, it just gave a little bit of insight. There wasn't quite as much with the whole William story as I wanted. He is probably one of my, if not my favorite character in the story, but I'm sure we'll get more from him in the next episode. And there's definitely a confrontation, I guess, coming between him, Stubbs, and Bernard as well. But yeah, overall, yeah, I think this episode was anything but anticlimactic. To me, this episode was a stellar setup going into the season finale, which is next week, which again, I'm pretty sad about, to be quite honest, because this has been a pretty great ride. And I feel sorry for anyone who's checked out of this show, for quite honestly, because like I said in the beginning, I think this is one of the best shows on TV. There's still those philosophical ideas there that have been there the whole time through the first 2 seasons, but they've also managed to make this season less convoluted, and they've also managed to up the action to keep you, to keep maybe people who were turned off by the wordiness of the other 2 seasons, to keep them more interested. They've added much more action this season, which I thought would help and would get people on board, because, you know, eye candy typically does that. But I guess maybe those people have already checked out and aren't aware that this is going on. But yeah, overall, I enjoyed this episode just like I enjoyed every other episode this season. I have very little complaints about any episode this season. I think I thoroughly enjoyed it for the most part. And I don't know, let me know if you think something similar. Am I crazy? I don't know, but this season has been pretty stellar in my opinion. Yeah, so overall, I enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys thought about it in the comments down below. I'd be curious to hear what you think. Yeah, let me know. Like, comment, share, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications. And of course, I'll see you next week for the season finale, and we'll wrap up the whole season. So, yeah, thanks for watching.